Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So here's a twist. I could call it breaking news. Senate Intelligence Committee is calling on Julian Assange to testify. Well, that's bizarre. The committee itself is calling on Julian Assange to testify. That's interesting. I want to read the article out because it's a short article. And an odd twist to this, if you remember, I don't remember if this came out in the Intercept or where this came out, but there was a back channel having communications with this idea of Julian Assange testifying or withholding some of the information that was going to be released from the CIA. So a back channel did exist at one point between the Department of Justice and WikiLeaks, or at the very least his attorneys. Well, this seems to be more of a formal call for testimony. Let's read it. Right here. Senate Intelligence Committee calls on Assange to testify. WikiLeaks announced in a tweet on Wednesday, the Senate Intelligence Committee called on its founder, Julian Assange, to testify on Russian interference in the 2016 election. U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee calls on editor Julian Assange to testify. Letter delivered via U.S. Embassy in London. WikiLeaks legal team says they are considering the offer, but testimony must conform to a high ethical standard, the tweet stated. Thing is, Julian Assange had said on numerous occasions that it wasn't Russia. And let me intercede for a moment. Over and over and over and over and over again, every time you said something to him, he said it wasn't Russia. He kept saying it. I don't know how many times he said it. But I'm making a point that you're asking him another time in order to testify before the Senate. Great. What do you think he's going to tell you now that he didn't tell you before? He's not going to tell you who gave it to him. Because for him, he's been sitting in an embassy for 6 years over stuff similar to this idea of press freedom and everything else. He's not going to give it to you. He will tell you that it wasn't Russia. I suspect that's not the answer you're going to want. That said, if you're a Republican and you want to protect Trump, that is the answer you better live in. You better live in that answer. The one man on the planet that would know, of all the human beings on the planet Earth, the one man that would know is sitting here, Julian Assange, and he is saying it wasn't the Russians. I love it. Let's keep going. The tweet included a copy of the letter delivered to Assange. Right here. As you are aware, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence is conducting a bipartisan inquiry into the Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election. I love that. They've already have a conclusion about it. The Russian interference. How do you know it's Russian interference? You're doing an investigation right now. How do you know the results of the investigation before you do the investigation? The court case is going through the legal proceedings, meaning an assertion by the government is not the same thing as an actual conviction or a show of guilt. You've jumped to a conclusion before you've even made a determination on what happened. That's what I'm getting at. The intelligence services coming up saying we have intelligence about XYZ, that's different than knowing that that's true. And I understand this is a governmental apparatus, and so they're speaking in governmental terms, so they use the things that are dredged up in the government itself. I'm just saying, if you have all of these court cases going on that are trying to some degree determine Russian interference, how are you jumping to a conclusion? Well, whatever. That's my pet peeve. As part of the inquiry, the committee requests that you make yourself available for a closed interview with bipartisan committee staff at a mutual agreeable time and location. Please respond in writing upon receipt of this letter. If you have any questions about this letter, please contact the committee counsel. Now, here's the thing. They said please respond with a location and a time. It's possible that they will take him in London. What if that subcommittee is willing to show up in the London embassy in order to have a conversation with Julian Assange? I don't know the ramifications of that. Part of me thinks that's positive, but I don't know that. So let's see. I don't know the motives behind what's taking place. I would imagine if you're a Republican, you would want this meeting. If you are a Republican and you're one of those people like Nunez and you're trying to protect Donald Trump, you want to take this meeting. You want to give him some level of immunity, and you want him getting out there saying it wasn't the Russians. They are trying to delegitimize your president. Do you understand this? Meaning, from the standpoint of the Republican Party, maybe the Republican Party doesn't necessarily like him as a whole. They are trying to delegitimize Trump. Now, I don't like Trump, so I don't necessarily all that much care about this. I care about this from the standpoint of the left and this idea that Donald Trump didn't win because of himself. He won because of the Russians. And by extension, Hillary Clinton didn't lose because she was a failure and because status quo wasn't wanted. They didn't want a systems manager. They wanted fundamental change. Well, by extension, it wasn't status quo that lost. It was the Russians. I don't like that case. I don't like that argument. I think that argument is nonsense. And yet that's the argument they're pushing. If you are a Republican, you want Julian Assange sitting somewhere saying it wasn't the Russians. You want him looking into a camera, speaking into a mic. It wasn't the Russians. It wasn't the Russians. Are you saying it wasn't the Russians? Yes, I'm saying it wasn't the Russians. I'm just saying, if your goal in this was to protect Trump, that's what you would want. You would want this conversation. So I don't know who's motivating this particular conversation, but we'll find out. Let's see. It requests Julian Assange to make himself available for a closed interview. It read that spokespeople for the Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Richard Burr, Republican from North Carolina, and top Democrat Mark Warner of Virginia, declined to comment on the letter. Well, that's interesting. Mark Warner, if I'm not mistaken, was the one that told Comey to kill the back channel with Assange. So that's interesting. Interviewing Assange is a complicated prospect, as WikiLeaks founder has been holed up in an Ecuadorian embassy in London since 2012. CNN reported in July that his situation has become untenable and may soon leave. Well, you mean he may be soon evicted out of that embassy by an Ecuadorian president who's essentially not necessarily all that on board with Ecuadorian sovereignty. That's what's taking place. Yes, I'm slightly bitter about this. I'm not quite sure why. The letter from WikiLeaks provides a hint at where the Senate Intelligence Committee's Russia investigation is probing when it comes to Russian election interference and collusion. You know what's wild about this? They could have just went to the person who would have known right off the bat. They did all of this nonsense for 2 years. Of all the people that would have known, it would have been Julian Assange. Burr and Warner have said little in recent months about the direction of the panel's investigation into possible collusion between members of the President Donald Trump's campaign team and Russia, while they have quietly conducted more than 100 interviews for an investigation that's been ongoing for more than a year. The committee has been interviewing most senior members of Trump's campaign team behind closed doors. This year, the committee has released a report or held hearings on U.S. election security, the intelligence community's assessment of the 2016 Russian election interference, the Obama administration's response to Russia's use of social media. But they have said their findings on possible collusion for the end of the investigation. Save their findings on possible collusion at the end of the investigation. WikiLeaks was apparently cited, though not by name, in last month's indictment from special counsel Robert Mueller's team of 12 Russian intelligence officials for hacking the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's campaign. The indictment suggests Assange and WikiLeaks are conduit for Russian intelligence in distributing hacked Democratic Party emails in 2016. If you would have given those emails to a news agency would have released those emails. WikiLeaks was releasing information that somebody gave to them. And not just that, they've already stated that it wasn't the goddamn Russians. Just saying. All right, I'm going to end this. This one wasn't meant to be long. It was just a heads up. They're trying to get Assange for a meeting. I find this to be very interesting because I don't know where this goes. Who's the motivating factor behind this meeting? And what are their motivations and their aims in making this meeting? Meaning, are they going to listen when he says, for the 100th time, it wasn't the goddamn Russians? And further still, if he brings up the name Seth Rich, is a Democrat going to cut one and a Republican pass out? He just like, Republican just passes out. Oh my God, he said Seth Rich. Yeah, I'm fascinated by this because I think this is a quirk. I have no idea where this goes. I could guess. I could say if it was me and if I was a Republican and I was trying to protect Trump, this will be the meeting that I would want to have. I would say, I would get Assange saying it wasn't the Russians, and I would have him on camera saying it wasn't the Russians, and I would say, look, the guy who knows this guy, and he's saying it wasn't the Russians. He's saying it wasn't the Russians. He's saying there's no collusion. Now, you guys have come up with a predetermined outcome because you guys wanted to attack Trump and you've hated Trump. This is the guy to know. Now, my point in this, I don't necessarily know if Republicans are trying to piss in the wind. They have been unwilling to push back against the narrative on this, either because they believe that the narrative is too much in and of itself to push back against. Either they want to weaken the president themselves because they don't particularly like him, so they don't necessarily want that strand of republicanism to exceed. I don't know. Taking this meeting, however, is interesting. I find it to be extremely interesting. Part of me hopes Assange takes the meeting. I want him to take the meeting. I want him to say that it wasn't the Russians. Now, the question becomes again, what is the motivations of the people involved? I don't know. What are they trying to get out of this? I don't know. That's why it's kind of hard to predict what's taking place. So, I'll end this. This is a setup. They could have called Assange a long time ago. Jay, yeah. Jay, I agree with you. They could have called him a long time ago. And they had back channels. Here's the thing. Assange's legal team had back channels. They squandered the back channel. They scuttled it. Comey, and if I'm not mistaken, Warner, scuttled the back channel with Assange when this idea came up of giving, I think it was like limited immunity or something like that. He's not even a goddamn American citizen. But communications was taking place. I don't know if Assange is going to take this. And if he takes it, he should not come out the embassy to take it. If they're going to come, they're going to come there in order to have that communication and that conversation. Now the question becomes, what are the motivations of the people involved? I would say more than anything else. I would say he's going to have an interesting conversation with his legal team and making a determination on whether to take this. Because whatever they have come up with, it's not just a legal conversation. There's also an issue of politics, because this will be played in political sphere. I guarantee you that. So I will end this. They don't reveal their sources, period. Hello, jerk. Well, right. They don't reveal their sources, but he did say who it wasn't. And as for the self-rich stuff, when I've shown the video before where he was talking to the news agency, he dropped the name out of nowhere, just out the blue. People are like, what the hell are you talking about? Now, either he was lying or misdirection for that. That's possible. I don't know. But he was clear that it wasn't the Russians. Saying who it wasn't is not the same thing as revealing your source. So, I feel you. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. Of course, you can always support through Patreon. Let me make sure I haven't missed anyone. And I don't think I did. And come on. And the answer is my website is streaming extremely slowly. Okay, good. Yeah. All right, guys. You have a good one. Thanks, everyone.